The judge's gavel slammed down with a crack, sharp and final, like a gunshot straight to my heart. But it wasn't the 5-year prison sentence that broke me. It was the voice, familiar, furious, rising from the witness stand. "Your Honor, I demand the maximum sentence. My mother is a danger to society. She pushed my wife down the stairs and killed our unborn child." My son was standing there, holding my daughter-in-law tightly, his finger pointed straight at my face like a dagger. For the next 1,825 days of hell, they came to the prison every month. I never agreed to see them. I let them believe I had crumbled with guilt. But they were dead wrong. I didn't sit there repenting for a crime I didn't commit. I sat there, calculating every move, every step in a game of vengeance that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. I'm Violet Sterling, 60 years old. My legs are numb from 5 winters curled up on a cold metal cot. The sound of iron grinding against concrete haunted me for 1,825 days. But today, the rhythm changed. The steel door opened outward. For the first time in 5 years, the air didn't smell like bleach. It smelled like asphalt and exhaust. To me, it's the scent of freedom. I adjusted the gray coat I'd worn the day I was booked. Now it hung looser. Prison strips me down, leaves only bone and resolve. My hair, once chestnut, was silver now. I expected Maxwell, my lawyer, my lifeline through weekly letters. I expected his quiet black sedan. Instead, I walked into chaos. Sunlight, cameras, flashes, shutters clicking like locusts. A media circus, not freedom. And there, standing center stage in front of the lens of a local news crew, were the architects of my ruin, Jason and Bella. My son wore a navy suit that I recognized. I had bought it for him for his 30th birthday. It looked expensive, tailored, and completely out of place against the backdrop of a correctional facility. He held a bouquet of white lilies. Lilies, the flowers you bring to a funeral, not a homecoming. His face was pale, his eyes darting nervously around the crowd, never quite landing on me. And then there was Bella. My daughter-in-law was a vision of carefully curated sympathy. She wore a modest pastel dress that I knew cost more than the annual salary of the guards standing behind me. Her makeup was done to look natural, the kind that takes 2 hours to perfect. She was clutching Jason's arm with one hand and dabbing a dry eye with a handkerchief in the other. As soon as she saw me, the performance began. "Mother!" she cried out. Her voice was shrill, pitched perfectly for the microphones extended toward her. She didn't run to me. She walked, measured and slow, making sure the cameras could capture the magnanimous forgiveness of the victim. She was playing the saint, the poor, barren woman welcoming back the monster who had robbed her of a child. I stood still. I didn't tremble. I didn't frown. I simply watched them approach as one might watch a car crash in slow motion. Jason reached me first. He shoved the lilies toward me, his hands were shaking. I could smell him, a mix of nervous sweat and that expensive cologne he always used to mask the scent of his failures. "Mom," he mumbled, his voice barely audible over the paparazzi. Just take the flowers. Please. For the cameras. For the cameras. Not for me. Not for the 5 years of hell I had endured because of his silence. Even now, standing at the gates of my freedom, his only concern was the optical illusion of a happy family. Bella squeezed in next to him, placing a manicured hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt like a brand. I could smell her perfume. It was sweet, cloying, like rotting fruit covered in sugar. "We forgive you, Violet," she said, loud enough for the reporters to hear. "We want you to come home. We can start over. The fans, the public, they love a redemption story." She leaned in for a hug, angling her face so her good side was towards the lens. In that split second, I saw the truth. They weren't here to apologize. They were here to manage the narrative. Bella needed content for her social media empire. Jason needed to show the shareholders that the Sterling family was united, stable. They needed the crazy old woman to be docile, grateful, and under their control. They thought I was the same woman they locked away. They thought I was broken. They were wrong. I didn't push her away. That would have been aggressive. I didn't scream. That would have been hysterical. Instead, I did something far more damaging. I did absolutely nothing. I let Bella's arms wrap around empty air as I sidestepped her with the grace of a ghost. I didn't even look at her. I treated her with the ultimate indignity. I made her invisible. The cameras caught it. The awkward stumble as Bella hugged nothing but the dusty wind. The confusion on her face. The crack in the mask. I walked past them. Straight past the flowers. Straight past the pleading look in my son's eyes. Parked 50 feet away, a sleek black Bentley waited like a silent predator. The back door was already open. Maxwell stood there, leaning against the frame. He looked older, his hair thinner, but his spine was as stiff as a steel rod. He didn't smile. He just nodded. A salute from one soldier to another. The crowd went quiet. The script had been flipped. The villain wasn't groveling. The villain was walking away. "Mom! Wait!" Jason called out. The desperation in his voice was real now. He jogged after me, grabbing my elbow. "Where are you going?" "The car is this way. We have a dinner planned." "The press." I stopped. I turned slowly to face him. I looked at the hand gripping my sleeve. My gaze was physical, a weight that pressed down on his fingers until he instinctively let go and pulled back. I looked up at his face. My handsome boy. My weak, foolish boy. I saw the fear in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of losing his mother. He was afraid of losing his shield. He knew, deep down, that without me, the wolves would come. He just never realized that he had married the leader of the pack. I leaned in close enough to see the beads of sweat trapped in his hairline. I kept my voice low, a whisper meant only for him. I didn't want the cameras to hear this. This wasn't a performance. This was a promise. "Jason," I said, my voice smooth and dry, like old parchment. "Mom, please." He whispered back. "Don't make a scene." "I'm not making a scene, darling," I replied. A faint, cold smile touched my lips. "I'm making a reservation." He blinked, confused. "Go home with your wife," I continued, enunciating every syllable. "Eat your roast beef. Drink the 1996 Cabernet from my cellar. Enjoy your dinner tonight, Jason." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us until he stopped breathing. "Because it is the last meal you will ever eat at the head of the table." I didn't wait for his reaction. I turned and slid into the leather back seat of the Bentley. The door closed with a solid, expensive thud, instantly sealing out the heat, the noise, and the stench of hypocrisy. "Drive," I said. Maxwell didn't ask questions. He signaled the driver, and the car purred into motion. I didn't look forward. I looked at the side mirror. I watched the figure of my son shrinking in the distance. He stood alone on the pavement, the wilted lilies hanging by his side, while Bella frantically gestured at the cameraman to cut the feed. They looked small. They looked chaotic. They looked like the past. I leaned back into the seat, closing my eyes. The leather was cool against my neck. For 5 years, I had slept on a mattress thin enough to feel the metal lattice beneath it. Now, I was wrapped in luxury, but I felt no comfort. Comfort is for those who can afford to rest. "To the hotel, Violet?" Maxwell asked from the front seat. "Yes," I replied. "And Maxwell?" "Yes? I want the files on the desk when I get there." "They are already waiting," he said. Of course they were. The car turned onto the highway, picking up speed. The prison complex faded into the horizon, a gray blemish on the landscape. My mind began to drift. The hum of the engine sounded like a time machine, pulling me back, not to the prison cell, but to the time before. To the big house on the hill. To the laughter that used to fill the dining room. To the moment I first opened the door to the girl with the innocent eyes and the heart full of poison. 5 years ago, I had everything. A fortune, a legacy, a family. And then, I let the devil in. The memories didn't wash over me like a tide. They struck me like a gavel. Bam. The day Bella moved in. Bam. The day Jason asked for the first loan. Bam. The day they told me I was going to be a grandmother. I opened my eyes and stared at my own reflection in the darkened window. The woman staring back wasn't Violet the victim. She was Violet the executioner. "Let's go back," I whispered to the empty air. "Let's remember how the trap was set." 5 years ago, the Sterling estate was not a prison of memories. It was a monument to the American dream. My late husband, Richard, built this place with steel and grit. He used to say that a house is only as strong as its foundation. We had 10 acres of manicured lawn, a garage full of vintage cars, and a silence so expensive you could almost hear the interest accruing in the bank accounts. It was lonely, yes, but it was safe. Then, the noise returned. Jason and Bella moved in shortly after their wedding. It was supposed to be temporary. They were waiting for their penthouse in the city to be renovated. Or at least, that was the story. In reality, Jason's latest venture, a tech startup that never actually started, had drained his liquidity. I welcomed them. I was a mother, after all. The silence of the big house had begun to weigh on me, and I missed my son. I missed the noise of life. I didn't know that I was inviting termites into the woodwork. The first few months were a blur of dinner parties and champagne. Bella was charming. She played the role of the devoted wife perfectly. She knew which wines to pair with fish, she laughed at my dry jokes, and she constantly reorganized the fresh flowers in the foyer. But slowly, the conversation at the dinner table shifted. It was always about money. Jason would push his steak around his plate, sighing theatrically. "The market is brutal right now, Mom," he would say. "I have this opportunity in crypto. It's a sure thing. I just need a bridge loan. 200,000. I'll pay you back next quarter." I always wrote the check. That was my sin. I enabled him. I treated his incompetence like a minor injury that could be fixed with a band-aid made of cash. But the checks were never enough. The tension in the house began to rise like humidity before a storm. Jason became irritable. Bella became distant. They stopped joining me for breakfast. I would hear them arguing in their wing of the house. Muffled shouts. Doors slamming. Then came the demand. "The trust fund," Jason said one evening. He didn't ask, he demanded. "Dad set it up for me. Why are you holding it hostage? I'm 30 years old, for God's sake." I sat at the head of the mahogany table, swirling my glass of Pinot Noir. "The terms of the trust are clear, Jason," I said calmly. "The principal is transferred upon your 35th birthday, or upon the birth of the first heir," he finished for me, slamming his hand on the table. "I know the clause, Mom. It's archaic. It's controlling. It's protection," I countered. "Your father wanted to ensure there was a future to provide for." I refused to sign the early release papers. My intuition, that quiet voice Richard used to admire, told me something was wrong. Jason wasn't ready. He was desperate. And desperate men make foolish decisions with family fortunes. The atmosphere in the house turned frigid. They treated me like a landlord they despised but couldn't afford to evict. And then, the winter thawed. It was a Tuesday morning. I was in the sunroom, reviewing the quarterly reports with my reading glasses perched on my nose. Bella walked in. She wasn't wearing her usual silk robe. She was dressed in white, her face glowing with a softness I hadn't seen before. She sat down opposite me and placed a hand over her stomach. "Violet," she said softly, "we have news." I looked up. My heart did a traitorous little skip. "I'm late," she whispered. "We did a home test this morning. It's positive." The world stopped. In that moment, I wasn't the shrewd businesswoman. I wasn't the protector of the sterling fortune. I was just an aging widow who desperately wanted to see her husband's eyes in a new generation. The suspicion that had been building in my gut vanished, replaced by a warm, blinding light. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Yes," Jason said, stepping into the room behind her. He was smiling, a real smile. The tension was gone from his shoulders. "We're going to have a baby, Mom. The condition, the clause, the birth of the first heir. It was the key to the vault, and they had just found it. But I didn't care about the money." I walked over and hugged them both. I cried. I actually cried tears of joy onto the shoulder of the woman who was plotting my destruction. "We need to be sure," Jason said, pulling back. "I don't want to go to a public clinic. The paparazzi, you know how they are with Bella." I called Ryan. Dr. Ryan Miller, Jason's fraternity brother from college, a concierge doctor for the elite. I had never liked Ryan. He had a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and he wore watches that cost more than a surgeon's salary should allow. But he was a friend of the family. That afternoon, Ryan arrived with his medical bag. He set up a makeshift examination room in the guest suite. I waited in the hallway, pacing back and forth on the Persian rug. I felt like a young father in a 1950 seconds movie. 20 minutes later, Ryan came out. He was wiping his hands with sanitizer. He looked at me and nodded professionally. "Congratulations, Violet," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "She's about 6 weeks along. Everything looks viable. I've prescribed some vitamins and bed rest." She's fragile. Fragile, I repeated. The word triggered an instinct to protect. Yes, no stress, and certainly no travel. Jason walked out behind him, looking triumphant. Well, Mom? Is that proof enough? It was. It was everything I wanted. The next morning, I called Maxwell. Prepare the transfer documents, I told him over the phone. Release the trust. Trigger the grandchild clause. Violet, Maxwell's voice was cautious on the other end of the line. Are you sure? This is the entire liquid asset portfolio. Once you sign, Jason has full control. You lose your leverage. He's giving me a grandson, Maxwell, I said, looking out the window at the garden where I imagined a swing set would go. It's time to trust him. Maxwell sighed. I'll bring the papers over tomorrow afternoon. But Violet, I need to show you something first. What is it? The credit card supplements. The ones you gave Bella for household expenses. I was doing the monthly reconciliation. And? There are some irregularities. Large payments to a consulting firm in the Caymans. And several withdrawals at a casino ATM in Vegas 2 weeks ago. I thought she was in New York for Fashion Week? I paused. The warm light of the grandmother fantasy dimmed slightly. Bring the papers, I said, my voice hardening. And bring the statements. The next 24 hours were a battle between my heart and my head. My heart wanted to sign the papers, buy a crib, and knit blankets. My head, the part of me that had helped Richard build an empire, was screaming that a pregnant woman doesn't withdraw cash at a casino. When Maxwell arrived the next day, he laid 2 folders on the desk in the library. One contained the deed to the sterling fortune. The other contained the evidence of Bella's lies. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered over the signature line of the trust document. Jason was outside the door, probably pacing, probably already spending the money in his head. I looked at the statement. XYZ Consulting, $15,000. Sapphire Gentlemen's Club, $5,000. Wait. Why would my pregnant daughter-in-law be spending money at a gentleman's club? I capped the pen. Not today, Maxwell, I said quietly. Good choice, the lawyer replied. Leave the papers here. Tell Jason there is a clerical delay. I need a few days. What are you going to do? Maxwell asked. I looked at the closed door of the library. I could hear Jason's footsteps in the hallway. I'm going to do what I should have done from the beginning, I whispered. I'm going to stop being a mother and start being an auditor. I didn't know it then, but putting that pen down was the act that would sentence me to hell. But it was also the only reason I would eventually survive it. The trap was set, but the mouse had just decided to sniff the cheese before biting. And the cheese smelled rotten. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a held breath, not of peace. After Maxwell left, I didn't confront Jason. I didn't scream. I simply became a shadow in my own home. I watched. I listened. I became the auditor I promised I would be. The first crack in the facade appeared 3 days later. It was subtle, a smell. I was walking past the guest wing where Bella and Jason were staying. The door was ajar. Bella was supposedly napping, resting the heir to the sterling fortune. But as I passed, I caught a whiff of something that shouldn't exist in a pregnant woman's room. Smoke. It was faint, buried under layers of lavender, air freshener, and Chanel perfume, but it was there. The acrid, unmistakable scent of burning tobacco. I stopped. My hand hovered over the door handle. A pregnant woman smoking? It was irresponsible. It was dangerous. But then, I heard the clink of glass. Not a water glass. The heavy, hollow sound of a wine bottle hitting a coaster. I didn't enter. Not yet. I needed more than a smell. I needed proof. Opportunity knocked the following Tuesday. Jason was at a golf tournament, trying to network with investors who were already tired of his pitches. Bella had gone to her prenatal yoga class. The house was empty. I walked into their suite. It was a mess of designer clothes and discarded shopping bags. It smelled of excess. I moved to the wastebasket in the bathroom. I don't know what possessed me to look there. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was the suspicion that had been gnawing at my gut like a rat. I put on a pair of latex cleaning gloves. I reached in. Under a pile of makeup wipes, I found it. A receipt. It was crumpled into a tight ball. I smoothed it out on the marble vanity. East Side Women's Clinic. Dated yesterday. I frowned. Why would Bella go to a low-income clinic on the east side when Dr. Ryan, the overpriced concierge doctor, was making house calls. I looked at the itemized list. It wasn't for an ultrasound. It wasn't for vitamins. It was for a standard gynecological checkup. And a refill for birth control pills. My blood ran cold. If she was pregnant, she wouldn't need birth control. If she was pregnant, Ryan would be handling everything. I looked around the room with new eyes. This wasn't a nursery in the making. It was a staging ground. My eyes landed on the bedside table. Bella's iPad. She usually took it everywhere, glued to her social media feed, but she must have forgotten it in her rush to yoga. I picked it up, locked. I stared at the screen. I thought about her, her vanity, her obsession with herself. I tried her birthday. Incorrect. I tried her wedding anniversary. Incorrect. Then I thought about the man she spent all her time texting. The man who supposedly confirmed her pregnancy. I typed in 0815. Ryan's birthday. I knew it because I had sent him a card every year since he was Jason's college roommate. The screen unlocked. My stomach dropped. The wallpaper wasn't a picture of Jason. It was a selfie of Bella and Ryan, half naked, laughing in a hotel room I didn't recognize. I felt bile rise in my throat. My hands shook, but not from frailty. They shook from rage. I tapped the messaging app. The thread with Dr. Ryan was at the top. I didn't want to read it. I wanted to throw the device through the window, but I forced myself to scroll. I needed to see the bottom of the abyss. Ryan. Did the old lady sign the papers yet? Bella. Not yet. She's stalling, but Jason is pushing her hard. He's so desperate. It's pathetic. Ryan. Keep up the act. How does the silicone belly feel? Is it itchy? Bella. It's annoying. I hate wearing this thing. I just want the money so we can get out of here. When the wire hits, we execute phase 2. Ryan. Phase 2. The accident. A tragic fall down the stairs. You lose the baby. You blame the stress. You file for divorce. We split the trust and leave the country. Bella. And Jason? Ryan. Jason gets nothing. Just a broken heart and a broke mother. I lowered the iPad. The room seemed to spin. It wasn't just greed. It was a demolition. There was no baby. There never was. They were going to fake a miscarriage. They were going to stage a tragedy to break my son, strip our assets, and run away together. The doctor and the wife, the best friend and the lover, they were monsters. I looked at the messages again. The timestamps showed they had been mocking us for months. Mocking Jason's gullibility, mocking my desire for a grandchild. They had taken the purest love a family can have, and turned it into a weapon. Suddenly, I heard the front door open downstairs. Jason? Violet? Bella's voice echoed in the foyer. She was back early. I didn't panic. A strange calm washed over me. It was the calm of a soldier who finally sees the enemy clearly. I slipped the iPad under my arm. I moved to the top of the stairs, hidden by the shadows of the landing. Bella was in the hallway below, pacing. She was on the phone. She didn't see me. She kicked off her heels and, right there, in the hallway, she reached under her loose blouse and adjusted something. I saw the outline of the strap. The fake bump. She laughed into the phone. I know, baby, I know, she cooed. It was Ryan on the other end. I recognized the tone. I'm sick of playing the saint too. The old hag is so boring. She looks at me with those sad puppy dog eyes. It's disgusting. She paused, listening to him. Don't worry, she continued, her voice dropping to a sinister whisper that carried up the stairs like a draft. She's going to sign. I'll make a scene at dinner, cry a little. Make Jason yell at her. She'll cave. And once the money is in Jason's account. Oops, a little slip on the stairs. A tragic accident. And we are free. She laughed again, a hollow metallic sound. I love you too, Ryan. We're going to be so rich. She hung up. I stood there for a moment, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. The sadness was gone. The mother who wanted to protect her son from the truth was gone. The widow who wanted a peaceful retirement was gone. In their place stood a sterling. I looked at the iPad in my hand. It was heavy. It was a grenade, and I was about to pull the pin. I took a deep breath. It smelled of furniture, polish, and betrayal. I didn't retreat to my room. I didn't call the police. Not yet. The police couldn't fix the hole in my son's head where his brain should be. I needed to shatter the illusion myself. I stepped out of the shadows. My heels clicked loudly on the hardwood floor. Bella looked up. Her eyes went wide. She quickly smoothed her blouse over the silicone lump. "Violet," she exclaimed, putting on her mask instantly. "I didn't know you were home. I was just—" "Save it," I said. My voice wasn't loud, it was deadly quiet. I held up the iPad. The screen was still glowing with her dirty secrets. "I know everything, Bella. Or should I say, the future Mrs. Miller?" Her face drained of color. The mask cracked. I started walking down the stairs. One step at a time, descending into the arena. "The game is over," I said. "And you have lost." I expected fear. When you catch a thief with their hand in the safe, they are supposed to tremble. They are supposed to beg. But Bella didn't tremble. She stood at the bottom of the landing, looking up at me with eyes that were terrifyingly void of emotion. She looked at the iPad in my hand, then back at my face, and then she smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was the smirk of a predator who realizes the cage door is still unlocked. "You really are pathetic, aren't you, Violet?" she said. Her voice was calm, almost bored. She didn't even try to reach for the device. I froze on the third step from the top. "Pathetic?" I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "I have proof, Bella. I have your messages. I have your medical records. It's over. You're leaving this house tonight." She laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound that echoed off the high ceilings. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, taking a step closer to the stairs. She looked up at me, tilting her head. "You think Jason will believe you? You think he'll believe the bitter, lonely old woman who has been trying to control his life since the day he was born? Or will he believe his grieving, traumatized wife? The truth is on this screen," I said, lifting the iPad. My hand was shaking now, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like fever. "Truth doesn't matter, Violet. Optics matter. Storytelling matters." Her face twisted into a mask of pure malice. "And let's be honest. You made it so easy. You wanted this baby so badly you ignored every red flag. You let us rob you blind because you were desperate to be grandma. It's really your fault, if you think about it." I opened my mouth to speak, to scream, to order her out of my house. But then, the room was cut by a sound that changed everything. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Tires on gravel. The heavy hum of an engine cutting. Then, the distinct thud of a car door closing outside. Jason was home. Bella's head snapped toward the front door. Then she looked back at me. The malice in her eyes vanished, replaced by a flash of calculation that was chilling to witness. "Perfect timing," she whispered. She reached up and grabbed the collar of her own silk blouse. With a violent jerk, she ripped it open, sending a button skittering across the hardwood floor. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer. She made a fist and swung it hard, straight into her own stomach. Into the silicone pad. Thump. She winced, not from pain, but from the effort. She messed up her hair. She looked wild, deranged. "Bella, stop it!" I shouted, taking a step down. "Too late," she hissed. She backed up until her heels were teetering on the edge of the first step, leading down to the foyer. She looked me dead in the eye. "Let's see who he believes," she said. "The mother, or the wife who just lost his child." And then, she let go. She didn't stumble, she didn't slip, she launched herself backward. It happened in slow motion. I saw her arms flail. I saw the triumphant glitter in her eyes turn into a performance of terror. Crash. Her body hit the wooden steps. Thud. She tumbled, limbs striking the banister, rolling down the remaining flight with a violence that made me sick to my stomach. Crack. She landed at the bottom of the stairs, splayed out on the Persian rug like a broken doll. She lay perfectly still. "No!" The scream tore from my throat. The front door burst open. Jason stood there, his keys still in his hand, a smile on his face that died the instant he saw the scene. "Bella?" he choked out. He dropped his briefcase. He dropped his keys. He ran. He didn't look at me. He ran straight to the heap of white fabric and blonde hair on the floor. "Bella! Baby! Oh my God!" He fell to his knees beside her. I stood at the top of the stairs, paralyzed. My hand was still gripping the iPad, the evidence of her treachery glowing uselessly against my palm. I couldn't move. My brain couldn't process the sheer insanity of what I had just witnessed. Bella stirred. She let out a low, agonizing moan. It was a masterclass in acting. Jason! She wheezed, clutching her stomach. My baby! Oh God, the baby! I'm here! I'm here! Jason stammered, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch her. What happened? Did you slip? Bella looked up. Tears were already streaming down her face, ruining her mascara. She lifted a shaking finger and pointed straight at me. She pushed me, Bella sobbed. I told her we were moving out. And she went crazy. She said, if she couldn't control you, no one could. Jason went rigid. Slowly, he turned his head. He looked up the stairs. I will never forget that look. It wasn't the look of a son. It was the look of a stranger. A stranger who hated me. Jason, no, I pleaded, finally finding my voice. I started to descend the stairs, my legs wobbling. She's lying. It's a trick. Look at the iPad. She was texting Ryan. There is no baby, Jason. She jumped. She did this to herself. Don't come near her. Jason roared. His voice shook the chandelier. I stopped dead on the middle step. Jason, please, listen to me, I begged, holding the iPad out like a shield. She's been stealing from us. She's not pregnant. It's a silicone belly. Just touch it. Touch her stomach. Shut up, he screamed. Just shut up. He turned back to Bella, who was now curling into a ball, sobbing hysterically into his chest. She tried to kill our baby, Jason, Bella wailed, burying her face in his shirt. She pushed me. I felt her hands on my back. She wanted me dead. I'm calling 911, Jason said, fumbling for his phone with trembling hands. Jason, look at the evidence. I cried out, desperation making my voice crack. I rushed down the remaining steps, reaching for his shoulder. I needed him to see. I needed him to wake up. As soon as my fingers brushed his suit jacket, he reacted. He stood up and shoved me. He didn't just push me away. He shoved me with the force of a man attacking an enemy. I stumbled back, my heels catching on the rug. I fell hard onto the floor, the iPad skidding across the wood and sliding under the entryway table. I gasped, the wind knocked out of me. I looked up at him from the floor. My son. The boy I had carried, the boy I had raised, the boy I had protected from the world. He stood over me, his chest heaving, his fists were clenched. For a second, I thought he was going to hit me. If anything happens to my wife, he spat, his voice trembling with a dark, poisonous rage, I will destroy you. I don't care who you are. I will destroy you. Jason, I whispered, tears blurring my vision. She is the snake, not me. He didn't hear me. He didn't want to hear me. He turned his back. He scooped Bella up in his arms. She buried her face in his neck, but as he carried her toward the door, I saw it. Just for a second. Over his shoulder, Bella opened one eye. She looked at me, sprawled on the floor, humiliated and broken. And she winked. Stay away from us. Jason shouted over his shoulder as he kicked the front door open. He carried her out into the night, toward his car. I lay there on the cold hardwood floor of the house my husband built. The silence returned, but this time, it was heavy, it was suffocating. I looked under the table. The iPad was still there. The screen had gone black. In the distance, I heard sirens. They were coming. But they weren't coming to save me. I realized then that truth doesn't matter when the lie is this beautiful. My son had made his choice. He chose the damsel in distress over the dragon. She claimed I was. I closed my eyes and waited for the police. I didn't try to run. I didn't try to hide. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that the fall Bella took was nothing compared to the fall I was about to take. The police didn't kick down the door. They didn't have to. Jason had left it wide open when he carried his victim out into the night. I was still sitting on the floor of the foyer, holding a glass of scotch I hadn't taken a sip of when the red and blue lights washed over the walls. They strobed against the family portraits hanging in the hallway, my husband's face, Jason's graduation photo, turning them into grotesque, flickering cartoons. I didn't resist. When the officer told me to stand up and turn around, I did. Violet Sterling, you are under arrest for aggravated assault and reckless endangerment of a viable fetus. The handcuffs were cold. They bit into my wrists, metallic and tight. But I was already numb. I was hauled out of my own home, the home I paid for, past the neighbors peeking through their curtains. I didn't lower my head. I stared straight ahead, into the dark void of the police cruiser. I thought Jason would be at the station. I thought, surely, once the adrenaline faded, he would realize the madness of this. He would come to bail me out. We would talk. I was wrong. The next 72 hours were a blur of booking photos, fingerprint ink, and a court-appointed lawyer because Maxwell couldn't reach me in time for the arraignment. Jason had filed for an emergency restraining order. He blocked my access to my own accounts. And then came the trial. It was swift. Brutally swift. In the court of public opinion, I was already a monster. The wealthy, jealous mother-in-law who pushed her pregnant daughter down the stairs. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded. I looked for Jason. He was sitting in the front row on the prosecutor's side. He wore a black suit. He looked devastated. He looked like a grieving father. Bella sat next to him, wearing a neck brace that I knew she didn't need, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. They called their expert witness first. Dr. Ryan Miller took the stand. He wore a white coat, though he certainly didn't wear one to the club where he partied with my daughter-in-law. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the jury. "Dr. Miller," the prosecutor asked, "can you describe the patient's condition when she arrived at your clinic?" "It was catastrophic," Ryan said. His voice was grave. "Mrs. Sterling suffered severe abdominal trauma consistent with a fall. The impact caused a placental abruption. We couldn't save the fetus." Lies. I gripped the edge of the table. There was no fetus. There was a silicone pad and a bag of deception, but he had falsified the records. He had forged the autopsy of a child that never existed. It was a perfect, airtight lie, and in your professional opinion, could this have been an accident? "Unlikely," Ryan said, looking directly at me with cold, dead eyes. "The angle of the fall suggests a forceful push from behind." A murmur went through the courtroom. The jury looked at me with disgust. I wanted to stand up and scream about the text messages, about the birth control pills, about the affair. But my lawyer had told me, without the iPad, we have no proof. It's your word against a grieving couple and a licensed doctor. And then, they called Jason. My son stood up. He walked to the witness stand. He didn't look at me. Not once. "State your name for the record." "Jason Sterling." "Mr. Sterling, tell us what you saw when you entered the house." Jason took a deep breath. He looked at his hands. "I came home. And I saw my mother at the top of the stairs. She looked manic. Did you see her push your wife?" This was it. The moment of truth. He hadn't seen it. He had walked in when Bella was already falling. He knew that. I knew that. Jason looked up. He looked at the judge. "I saw her hands extended," Jason said, his voice trembling. "I saw her shoving Bella. And then I saw my wife fall. I felt the air leave my lungs." He lied. He looked a judge in the eye and perjured himself to send his own mother to prison. "Mr. Sterling," the prosecutor continued, "your mother's defense team is asking for leniency, citing her age and clean record. What is your request?" Jason finally turned his head. He looked at me. But there was no love in his eyes. There was only calculation. "My mother is not well," he said. The sadness in his voice was so convincing it almost broke my heart. "She has been paranoid for months. She's been hoarding money, refusing to let me manage the family business. She's mentally unstable. She is a danger to herself and to society." He paused, letting the weight of his betrayal settle over the room. "I am asking for the maximum sentence. 5 years. She needs to be somewhere. Secure. Somewhere she can't hurt anyone else while I try to pick up the pieces of my family." I understood then. It wasn't just about punishment, it was about time. 5 years. That was exactly the amount of time he needed. With me in prison declared mentally unstable, he could petition the court for a conservatorship. He would get legal guardianship over my assets, he would get the trust, he would get the house. He would get everything without having to wait for me to die. He wasn't sending me to prison, he was sending me to the morgue, financially speaking. I didn't cry. The tears I had shed for him over the last 30 years dried up in an instant. The mother in me died right there in that chair. The judge banged the gavel. "Violet Sterling, in light of the testimony and the tragic loss of life, I am sentencing you to 5 years in the state correctional facility. Parole eligibility, after 3 years, 5 years. The bailiff moved behind me. Stand up, he grunted. I stood. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was straight. Jason! I called out. The courtroom was clearing out. Jason stood up. He turned his back to me instantly. He wrapped his arms around Bella. Bella buried her face in his shoulder, her body shaking with what looked like sobs. But as the bailiff grabbed my arm to lead me away, she turned her head slightly. From over Jason's shoulder, she looked at me. Her eyes were dry, her lips curled up. It was a smile of absolute victory. She had the money, she had the man. And she had won. Jason was stroking her hair, whispering comfort to the viper, completely blind to the fact that he had just orphaned himself. Let's go, the bailiff said, pulling me toward the side door. I took one last look at my son. The boy I used to read bedtime stories to, the boy whose scraped knees I used to bandage. He was gone. The man standing there was a stranger, a thief who shared my DNA. I turned away. I didn't look back. I walked through the side door, down the concrete hallway. The air got colder with every step. The sounds of the free world, the murmuring crowd, the distant traffic, faded away. They led me to a holding cell. The heavy steel door loomed in front of me. I stepped inside. The door slammed shut. The lock engaged with a final echoing thud. Darkness swallowed me. The flashback ended. The memory dissolved, leaving me back in the plush leather seat of the Bentley, staring at my own reflection in the window. The reflection of a woman who had survived the darkness. 5 years. I whispered to the glass. You took 5 years of my life, Jason. Now, I am going to take the rest of yours. In prison, time does not pass. It drips. For the first year, I just laid on my bunk and stared at the water stains on the ceiling. I mourned the woman I used to be. But somewhere around the 400th day, I stopped mourning. I started calculating. They thought they had buried me. They forgot that I am a seed. I didn't waste my time in the yard fighting for cigarettes. I spent it in the library. Maxwell, my loyal attorney, visited me every week. He didn't bring cookies. He brought books, corporate law, estate planning, forensic accounting. I read until my eyes burned. I learned that the law is not a shield for the innocent. It is a sword for those who know how to hold it. But a general needs an army. Or at least, a lieutenant. I found her in the cafeteria. Her name was Mia. She was 22, scrawny, with eyes that were constantly scanning the room like a radar. She was in for cyber fraud. She had hacked a bank to expose her boss's embezzlement, but the boss had better lawyers. She took the fall. I saw the other inmates circling her. They smelled her fear. They wanted her commissary money. I walked over. I placed my tray on her table. Eat, I said. The bullies looked at me. By then, my hair had gone completely gray, and my silence had earned me a reputation. They called me the Duchess. They knew I had nothing left to lose, which made me dangerous. They backed off. Why? Mia asked, picking at her bread. Because I need your fingers, I replied. And your brain. That night, we made a deal. I paid for her protection and her legal fees to get an early release. In exchange, she became my eyes on the outside. We worked in the library. Mia found a back door in the prison's educational tablets. It was rudimentary, but for a girl who could crack a bank firewall, it was an open door. What are we looking for, Violet? She whispered, her fingers flying across the greasy screen. Everything, I said. Follow the money. It took her 3 months. I remember the day she found the first thread. It was raining. The library smelled of damp wool and misery. Violet, Mia hissed. She turned the tablet toward me. Look at the transfers, she said. Jason has been draining the trust fund. But look where it's going. I squinted at the numbers. Shell Corp A, Shell Corp B. Drill down, I ordered. Mia tapped a few keys. They all route back to a single holding company in Delaware. Serpent Medical LLC. Who owns it? Dr. Ryan Miller. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. Bella wasn't just divorcing Jason. She and Ryan were laundering the money out of the Sterling accounts before she even filed the papers. They were bleeding him dry. Keep digging, I said. I need something personal. Something that breaks the narrative. A week later, Mia didn't just find a thread. She found a bomb. She slid the tablet over to me. Her face was pale. "Read this," she said. I hacked into the archival servers of the hospital system. Bella's medical history. I looked at the document. It was a surgical record from 10 years ago, long before she met Jason. Procedure: tubal ligation, sterilization. Notes: patient requested permanent contraception. Successful. I stared at the words until they blurred. Sterilized. Bella couldn't get pregnant. It wasn't biologically possible. The pregnancy, the nausea, the loss, it was all theater. A lie built on a foundation of silicone and pure evil. "There's more," Mia said. Her voice shook. "I got into Ryan's private cloud. He's arrogant. He thought a simple encryption key would stop me." She opened a folder. "He kept videos," she whispered. "Insurance. In case Bella tried to cut him out of the deal." I watched the screen. I watched the video. The library walls seemed to melt away. The sound of the rain faded. All I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. It wasn't the rapid beat of panic anymore. It was the slow, heavy thud of a war drum. I handed the tablet back to her. "Save it," I said. "Save it all." The memory faded, replaced by the soft hum of the air conditioning in the penthouse suite. I sat in a velvet armchair, a glass of 1986 Chateau Margaux in my hand. The wine tasted of blackberries and victory. Across the room, Mia sat at a glass desk. She was out now, released 6 months before me. She wore a sharp blazer, her hair cut in a stylish bob. She looked like the CEO of a tech startup, not an ex-con. Maxwell stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline. "The board meeting is tomorrow at 9, Maxwell said, turning to face me. "Jason is going to ask for a vote of confidence. He wants to sell the estate to cover his debts. He won't get the chance," I said calmly. I looked at Mia. "Do we have the package ready?" Mia nodded. She slid a sleek, silver USB drive across the table. It stopped inches from my wine glass. "It's all here, Violet," she said. "The financial trail, the medical records, and the folder from Ryan's cloud." I picked up the drive. It felt light, insignificant. Yet, it held enough explosive power to level a skyscraper. I thought about the video inside that folder. I remembered what I saw on that tablet in the prison library. It wasn't just a conversation. It was a confession. It was Bella and Ryan, drunk on champagne, laughing about the stupid old woman and her idiot son. But it was worse than that. They detailed exactly how Bella had practiced the fall, how she had padded her hips, how they had rehearsed the tears. They mocked my grief. They mocked Jason's tears. I closed my fingers around the drive. "You know," I said, looking at the two people who had become my real family. "Jason thinks I am old. He thinks I am weak. He thinks I came back to beg for an allowance." Maxwell smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. He has no idea that the lioness doesn't negotiate with the gazelle. I stood up. I walked to the mirror. I looked at the woman staring back. The wrinkles were there, yes, but the eyes were clear. "This is it," I said, holding up the USB drive, the silver bullet. I turned to Mia. "Keep a backup copy safe," I ordered. "Tomorrow, we go to the party. Jason wants a show? We will give him a finale he will never forget." I finished my wine in one swallow. It burned, just the way I liked it. "Get some sleep," I told them. "Tomorrow, we take back the crown." The boardroom of Sterling Enterprises is located on the 45th floor. It is a cage of glass and chrome, designed to make anyone sitting at the head of the table feel like a god. Today, my son sat in that chair. I didn't need to be in the room to know what he was saying. I knew the script. Maxwell had a paralegal live streaming the audio to my phone as we rode the elevator up. "It breaks my heart," Jason's voice crackled through my earpiece, thick with practiced sorrow. "My mother. She's struggling. Reintegrating into society after prison is hard. She's confused. She's lashing out. I'm asking the board to be patient. We need to keep her away from the company finances for her own protection." He paused for effect. I could almost hear the board members nodding, buying into the narrative of the dutiful son protecting the senile matriarch. "That is why," Jason continued, "I am proposing a motion to permanently liquidate the Sterling estate properties. We need the capital to stabilize the company during this difficult transition." "Stabilize," I whispered to the reflection in the elevator doors. He means liquidate to pay off his gambling debts and his wife's shoe habit. The elevator dinged. It was a soft, polite sound. The doors slid open. I stepped out. Maxwell was on my right, carrying a briefcase that contained the legal equivalent of a nuclear warhead. Mia was on my left, tapping away on her tablet, ready to cut the digital power lines. 2 security guards stood by the double doors. They were new hires. They didn't recognize me. One stepped forward, hand raised. "Ma'am, this is a closed meeting. You can't." "Step aside, Johnson," Maxwell said, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years of litigation. "Unless you want to be named as a co-conspirator in a federal fraud investigation." The guard hesitated. He looked at me. I didn't glare. I simply raised an eyebrow. It was the look I used to give employees before I fired them. He stepped back. I pushed the doors open. The conversation inside died instantly. 12 heads snapped toward me. Jason was mid-gesture, his hand raised in a plea for sympathy. He froze. His mouth hung open, a silent O of shock. "Mother," he squeaked. "What are you doing here?" "Security." "Save your breath, Jason," I said, walking toward the head of the table. My heels struck the marble floor with a rhythmic, military cadence. Click, click, click. I didn't shout. I didn't scream. I spoke with the calm volume of a CEO addressing a disappointing quarterly report. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," I said, resting my hands on the back of an empty chair. "I apologize for the interruption, but I'm afraid my son has omitted a few key details in his touching speech. You can't be here." Jason stood up, his face flushing red. "I have power of attorney. I have the conservatorship. You are legally incompetent." Maxwell corrected, stepping forward. He slammed a thick file onto the table. The sound made everyone jump. "As of 8 a.m. this morning, an emergency injunction was filed. We have presented evidence of gross breach of fiduciary duty. Jason Sterling has used company funds to purchase personal real estate, luxury vehicles, and questionable medical services." The board members began to murmur. Papers were shuffled. "This is a lie," Jason shouted. He looked desperate. "She's crazy. She's trying to ruin me." "The injunction is temporary," I said, cutting through his noise like a knife through silk. "But the freeze is immediate." I looked directly at Jason. "The conservatorship is suspended, Jason. And so are your privileges. You wanted to manage the money? Congratulations. Now you can try managing without it." I turned to the board. "The meeting is adjourned. We will reconvene when the audit is complete." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out. As the doors swung shut behind me, I heard the explosion of voices, but I didn't stop. The first domino had fallen. Now, I just had to wait for gravity to do the rest. 2 hours later, the scene shifted from the boardroom to Le Jardin, the most expensive French restaurant in the city. I wasn't there, but Mia had access to the restaurant's security feed. We watched from the hotel suite, sitting on the sofa like spectators at a gladiator match. Jason and Bella were at a corner table. They looked frantic. Bella was downing a martini, her hands gesturing wildly. Jason was on his phone, likely trying to reach his banker, who was currently ghosting him. They were doing what people like them always do when threatened, spending money to prove they still have it. They had ordered the lobster, the caviar, the vintage champagne. It was a lunch that cost more than a Honda Civic. Then came the moment. The waiter, a polite young man in a white vest, placed the leather bill folder on the table. Jason didn't even look at it. He tossed his black Amex card onto the tray with a dismissive flick of his wrist. Arrogance is a habit that dies hard. The waiter took the card. He walked to the terminal station near the camera. We watched. He swiped. He frowned. He swiped again. He typed something in manually. Then, he picked up a phone. Back at the table, Bella was applying lipstick, checking her reflection in a spoon. She looked bored. She had no idea the floor had just vanished beneath her feet. The waiter returned to the table. He didn't look deferential anymore. He looked pitying. "Mr. Sterling," the waiter said, loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. "I'm afraid the card has been declined." Jason laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "That's ridiculous. It's an Amex Black. Run it again." "I did, sir. The bank says the account is frozen." "Suspected fraud," they said. Bella stopped applying her lipstick. She froze. "Try this one," Jason said, pulling a visa from his wallet. His hands were shaking now. The waiter took it. He didn't even walk away. He used the handheld terminal. Beep, declined. Jason pulled out another. And another. Beep, declined. Beep, declined. The silence at their table was deafening. The other patrons, the socialites, the business rivals, were starting to stare. Whispers rippled through the dining room. "Jason!" Bella hissed. Her voice wasn't sweet anymore. It was venomous. "What is going on? Fix this. You are embarrassing me." I don't understand," Jason stammered. He was sweating. "Mom must have. She actually did it." "You told me she was powerless," Bella snapped. She slammed her purse on the table. "You told me the money was secure. Pay the bill, Jason. I am not washing dishes in my Prada dress." "I can't," Jason shouted back. "The accounts are locked." It was the first time I had ever seen them turn on each other. Without the glue of money, their love was falling apart faster than wet tissue paper. Finally, Bella threw her own credit card at the waiter. "Use mine," she spat. "And we are leaving." The waiter swiped Bella's card. Beep. Approved. Of course it was. Bella had her own stash, money she had siphoned away from Jason over the years. But the humiliation was already complete. Jason sat there, red-faced and impotent, while his wife paid for his lunch. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a text from Jason. "You crazy witch. You cut off my cards? We have clients here. Unfreeze the accounts now, or I swear to God I will have you committed to an asylum for the rest of your life." I picked up my phone. I took a sip of tea. I typed a reply slowly, enjoying every letter. "I'm not crazy, Jason. I'm just thrifty. I've cut your allowance. The company credit cards are for employees only. And since you failed your fiduciary review this morning, you are currently unemployed." I hit send. Then I typed one more line. "Grow up, son." On the screen, I saw Jason check his phone. He read the message. He turned purple. He threw the phone onto the table, cracking the screen. Bella leaned in, whispering furiously into his ear. She wasn't comforting him. She was plotting. I could see the gears turning in her head. She realized that the victim card was the only currency she had left. "They're not retreating," Maxwell said, watching the screen. "Look at them." Jason and Bella were huddled together now, typing frantically on Bella's phone. They were calling the only allies they had left, the press. "Good," I said, turning off the monitor. "Let them call the circus. Let them invite the cameras. The higher the stage, the harder the fall." "What's the plan for tonight?" Mia asked. "Tonight," I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. "We prepare the main course. They think this is about money. They don't realize that bankruptcy is the least of their problems." I walked to the window. The city lights were beginning to flicker on. "Tomorrow," I whispered, "we give them the truth." The invitations had gone out electronically at 2 p.m. By 7 p.m., the ballroom of the Sterling estate was packed. It was a marvel of modern crisis management. Jason and Bella had spun this as a charity gala for victims of domestic abuse, with themselves starring as the survivors. The audacity was breathtaking. I watched from the shadows of the mezzanine. Below me, the cream of society mingled with the sharks of the press. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. Cameras flashed like lightning in a summer storm. "They certainly know how to draw a crowd," Mia whispered, adjusting the tablet in her hands. She stood beside me, dressed in a sharp black tuxedo suit. She didn't look like a hacker anymore. She looked like an executioner. "Enjoy the view, Mia," I said, smoothing the lapel of my white blazer. "It's the last time this house will host a party for liars." Below us, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Jason walked out, holding Bella's hand. He looked exhausted but handsome, the perfect image of the weary protector. Bella was dressed in modest black, no jewelry. A calculated choice to look humble, vulnerable. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," Jason began. His voice was thick with emotion. "It has been a nightmare to have my mother, a woman I loved and trusted, try to destroy my family." He paused to wipe a non-existent tear. Bella squeezed his hand, looking down at the floor. "We just want peace," Bella added, her voice trembling into the microphone. "We want to move on. But Violet won't let us. She's obsessed. She's cut off our funds, trying to starve us into submission. She's a tyrant, the crowd murmured sympathetically. I saw reporters scribbling furiously. Now, I said to Mia. Cut the mic. Mia tapped her screen. A high-pitched screech of feedback tore through the room. Guests covered their ears. Jason winced and tapped the microphone. Hello? Is this thing on? It's on, Jason, I said. My voice didn't come from the stage. It came from everywhere. Mia had routed my headset through the main speakers. I stepped out of the shadows and began to descend the grand staircase. The spotlight operator, confused, swung the beam around until it found me. I stood there, bathed in light. I wasn't the gray, broken woman from the mugshot. I was Violet Sterling, they brace. And I was in my own house. Mother? Jason gasped. What are you doing? Security. Get her out of here. 2 guards started to move toward the stairs, but I held up a hand. I wouldn't do that, I said calmly. Unless you want to explain to the press why you're physically assaulting the legal owner of this property. I continued walking down, my eyes fixed on the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. I saw shock on their faces. I saw curiosity. You invited the press to hear the truth, didn't you, Jason? I asked, stopping at the foot of the stage. So let's give it to them. You're drunk, Bella hissed, forgetting her sweet victim act for a second. You're making a scene. No, dear, I smiled. It was a cold, razor-sharp smile. I'm making a presentation. I nodded to Mia. Play it. Behind Jason and Bella, the massive projection screen that displayed their charity logo flickered. The image distorted, then resolved into a crystal-clear document. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a medical record. The room went quiet. I could hear the hum of the projector fan. What is that? Someone in the front row whispered. That, I announced, my voice booming, is a medical record from St. Mary's Hospital. Dated 10 years ago. I pointed a finger at Bella. Patient, Bella Miller. Procedure, tubal ligation. Jason frowned. He turned around to look at the screen. He squinted. What does that mean? Jason asked, confused. Tubal ligation? It means she was sterilized, Jason, I said softly. 10 years ago. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the room. That's a lie, Bella screamed. Her face went pale, her eyes wide with panic. That's a forgery. She hacked the hospital. It's fake, is it? I countered. Then explain this. The screen flickered again. The medical document vanished. It was replaced by a video. It was grainy, taken from a laptop camera in a dimly lit room. But the faces were unmistakable. It was Bella. She was sitting on a bed in a hotel room, holding a glass of wine. And next to her, with his arm draped casually over her shoulder, was Dr. Ryan Miller. Jason froze. He stared at the screen. On the video, Bella laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. God, Ryan, this thing itches, the Bella on the screen said, pulling up her shirt to reveal a silicone pregnancy bump strapped to her stomach. The room erupted. Flashbulbs went off like a strobe light. Just a few more weeks, babe, Ryan said in the video, kissing her cheek. Once the old hag signs the trust over, we stage the fall. We claim the miscarriage. We take the money and run. I can't wait to see her face, Bella sneered on screen. Stupid cow. She actually bought the crib I picked out. She's so desperate for a grandkid, she's blind. And Jason? Ryan asked. Jason is an idiot, Bella replied, taking a sip of wine. He'll do whatever I say. He's my puppet. The video cut to black. Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. The truth hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Slowly, painfully, Jason turned away from the screen. He looked at Bella. His face was a mask of pure horror. His skin was the color of old paper. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Bella was trembling. She looked at the crowd, then at me, then at Jason. Jason, baby, she stammered, reaching for him. It's a deep fake. You know about AI, right? They made it up. It's not real. Jason took a step back. He looked at the screen again, where the frozen image of Ryan's arm around his wife still lingered. Jason's voice cracked. That's the hotel room in Vegas. The trip you took for your sister's wedding. No. No, it's not. Bella shrieked. Why? Jason asked. It was a whisper, but in the silent room, it sounded like a scream. Why are you in a hotel room with Ryan? Jason, please. Why? Jason roared. He lunged at her. The crowd screamed. Security guards rushed the stage, but not to stop me. They grabbed Jason, holding him back as he flailed toward his wife. You lied to me, Jason screamed, tears streaming down his face. There was no baby? It was all a lie? Bella backed away, tripping over her own heels. She looked at the press. The cameras were no longer friendly, they were predatory. They were zooming in on her panic, capturing every drop of sweat, every twitch of guilt. He was my friend. Jason sobbed, his legs giving out. He slumped into the arms of the security guard. Ryan was my best friend. I watched from the floor. I felt no joy. I felt no triumph. I only felt a deep, weary sadness. My son was broken. He was shattered into a million pieces, right there on the stage he had built for his own glory. Get those cameras out of here, Bella yelled, trying to cover her face with her hands. Stop filming. This is illegal. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos one last time. It's perfectly legal. You signed a release form for the live stream, Bella. You wanted the world to watch. I turned to the crowd. The show is over, I said. Please, see yourselves out. I turned my back on the stage. I didn't look at Jason. He was weeping on the floor, a broken man realizing that he had sold his mother for a phantom. I walked toward Mia, who was waiting by the exit. Did we get it all? I asked. Every second, Mia replied, closing her tablet. It's trending worldwide already. I nodded. Call the police, I said. Tell them Dr. Miller and Mrs. Sterling are ready for their close-ups. I walked out into the cool night air. The sounds of shouting and crying faded behind the heavy oak doors. The banquet of lies was over. Now, they would choke on the truth. The sirens didn't wail this time. They chirped, short, authoritative bursts of sound that cut through the murmur of the stunned crowd. I stood on the balcony, watching the end of the party. Officers swarmed the ballroom. They didn't treat Bella like an influencer. They treated her like a criminal. When they pulled her hands behind her back, the click of the handcuffs was audible even over the din of the room. It was a sharp, mechanical sound. The sound of consequences arriving. She didn't go quietly. She screamed. She kicked. She blamed everyone. It was Ryan, she shrieked, her mascara running in black rivers down her face. He made me do it. I'm a victim. Check his computer. They dragged her out past the stunned photographers. For once, she turned her face away from the cameras. Across town, at the same moment, another team was kicking down the door of Dr. Ryan Miller's private clinic. Maxwell texted me the update. Miller in custody. Attempted to flush hard drives. Failed. I felt no rush of adrenaline. I felt no joy. I just felt heavy. It was the heaviness of cleaning up a mess that had been rotting for years. 3 months passed. I didn't go to the courthouse. I didn't need to see them in orange jumpsuits to know they were defeated. I stayed at the estate, reclaiming room after room, scrubbing away the memory of their presence. Maxwell brought me the updates. He sat in my library, drinking Earl Grey tea, recounting the trial like it was a poorly written play. It was embarrassing, Violet, Maxwell said, shaking his head. They turned on each other before the opening statements were even finished. Predictable, I said, staring into the fireplace. Ryan's defense was that Bella was the mastermind, that she seduced him into falsifying the records. Bella's defense was that Ryan drugged her and coerced her. But the videos. Maxwell chuckled darkly. Those videos were the nail in the coffin. Ryan had filmed everything to protect himself. He thought that if Bella ever tried to cut him out of the fortune, he could blackmail her. Instead, he had created the perfect evidence for the prosecution. Every plan, every mockery, every rehearsal of the fall down the stairs, it was all there in high definition. The jury took less than 2 hours, Maxwell finished. Fraud, embezzlement, perjury, assault. They are looking at 10 to 15 years each. Good, I whispered. And Jason? Maxwell asked gently. I went silent. Jason hadn't been charged. He was deemed a victim of fraud. But in the eyes of the city, he was something worse than a criminal. He was a fool. He was the man who let his wife rob his mother blind while he clapped. I haven't heard from him, I said. He's been sleeping on friends' couches, Maxwell said. He lost the condo. The creditors took the car. He has to learn, I said, though the words tasted like ash. That night, the storm came. It was a classic New England nor'easter, rain lashing against the windows like gravel. I was in the study, reading a book I wasn't actually processing, when the doorbell rang. It wasn't the polite chime of a guest. It was a heavy, desperate leaning on the button. Bzzz. I knew who it was before I opened the door. I unlocked the heavy oak entrance. Jason stood there. He was soaked to the bone. He wasn't wearing a coat, just a wrinkled dress shirt that was stained and clinging to his shivering frame. He smelled of rain and cheap whiskey. He looked 10 years older than he had at the gala. His eyes were red, rimmed with dark circles. He looked like a ghost that had forgotten how to haunt. "Mom," he croaked. I didn't step back to let him in. I stood in the doorway, a barrier between him and the warmth of the house. "Jason," I said. My voice was steady. He slumped against the doorframe. I have nowhere else to go. Tony kicked me out. He said I was bad for his image. He laughed, a wet, broken sound. "Can I come in?" he asked, looking past me into the warm, golden light of the foyer. "I just need a shower. And maybe we can talk? Figure this out?" "Figure what out?" I asked. "The business, the accounts." He rubbed his face with a shaking hand. "I know I messed up, Mom. I know. I was stupid, but I'm your son. We can fix this. I can testify against Bella at the sentencing hearing. I can help you get the money back." He was still bargaining. He still thought this was a transaction. He thought that if he said the right words, the ATM would turn back on. "You really don't get it, do you?" I said softly. "What?" He blinked, swaying slightly. "Mom, I'm sorry, okay? I'm saying I'm sorry. What else do you want?" "I don't want your apology, Jason. It's counterfeit." I stepped out onto the porch, ignoring the rain that sprayed against my face. "Do you remember the day I went to prison?" I asked him. "Do you remember what you said in court?" I was manipulated," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Bella told me." "Bella told you lies," I interrupted, my voice rising over the wind. "But you chose to believe them. You didn't believe them because the evidence was good. You believed them because you wanted to." He froze. "You wanted me out of the way," I continued, staring into his bloodshot eyes. "You wanted the money without the mother. Bella just gave you the excuse you needed to pull the trigger." "No. That's not true," he whimpered. "It is true. You watched them drag me away. You watched me rot in a cell for 5 years. You never visited, you never wrote. You were too busy spending the money you thought you inherited." Jason fell to his knees. It wasn't a graceful motion. He collapsed onto the wet concrete of the porch. He grabbed the hem of my skirt. "Mom, please," he sobbed. "I have nothing. I have no one. You're all I have left." I looked down at him, my heart broke. It truly did. It shattered into 1,000 pieces seeing my boy, the child I had nursed through fevers and nightmares, kneeling in the mud. But I knew that if I picked him up now, I wouldn't be saving him. I would be dooming him. I reached down and gently peeled his fingers off my skirt. "You chose to trust a liar and a cheat instead of the woman who gave you life," I said. My voice was devoid of anger now. It was just final. "You made a trade, Jason. You traded me for her. And now, you have lost both. Don't do this," he begged, looking up at me. "I'm your son." "Yes," I said, stepping back inside. "You are my son. And that is why I have to do this. Because I raised you to be a man, not a parasite. And somewhere along the way, I failed. I won't fail you again by cushioning this fall." "Mom!" he screamed. "Good night, Jason." I grabbed the heavy brass handle of the door. I looked at him one last time. He was a small, wet heap in the darkness. "Learn to stand up," I whispered. I closed the door. Thud. The sound of the latch clicking into place echoed through the foyer. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. On the other side, I heard him pounding on the wood. I heard him screaming my name. "Mom! Open up, please, Mom!" I didn't lock it. I didn't need to. He knew, and I knew, that the door wasn't locked by a bolt. It was locked by 5 years of silence. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and let the first real tear I had shed since my release roll down my cheek. "I love you," I whispered to the wood. "That's why I can't open this door." I turned off the porch light, plunging him into the darkness he needed to navigate on his own. 6 months. That is how long it takes for a garden to recover after a harsh winter. I know this because I have spent the last half-year on my knees in the dirt, replanting the rose bushes that Bella had neglected. The Sterling estate is quiet now, but it is a different kind of silence than before. It isn't the heavy, suffocating silence of secrets. It is the peaceful silence of a library, or a church, or a forest after the rain. I sat on the back porch, watching the sky turn a bruised purple as the sun began to dip below the tree line. The air was crisp. It smelled of pine needles and wood smoke. Maxwell was inside, pouring tea. Mia was in the study, likely arguing with a senator on the phone about prison reform legislation. And Jason? I took a sip of my wine. I saw him last week. He didn't see me. I was parked across the street from the warehouse where he works now. He was loading crates onto a truck. He wore a neon yellow vest and work boots that were scuffed and dirty. He looked tired. He looked thinner. The soft, doughy look of a man who has never worked a day in his life was gone, replaced by the lean, hard lines of exhaustion. I didn't roll down the window. I didn't wave. I didn't write him a check. Maxwell told me that Jason is renting a studio apartment on the south side. It's small. It has a leaky faucet. And for the first time in his 35 years, he is paying for it with money he earned with his own sweat. He called me once, a month ago. He didn't ask for money. He just said, "Happy birthday, Mom." It was awkward. It was short. But it was the first honest conversation we've had in a decade. I didn't invite him over. Not yet. I have learned the hardest lesson a mother can learn. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is to stop helping. I spent his whole life clearing the stones from his path, and because of that, he never learned to watch where he was walking. Now, he has to stumble. He has to fall. He has to learn that the ground is hard, so that he can finally learn how to stand up. The screen door creaked open behind me. "Violet," Mia's voice was cheerful. She stepped out onto the porch, holding a tablet. The final paperwork for the foundation just came through. I smiled at her. "The Sterling Justice Initiative?" "Yes," she said, sitting in the wicker chair beside me. "We have the first grant approvals ready. 3 women, all wrongfully convicted, all mothers." I looked at Mia. She is not my blood. She doesn't have my eyes or my nose, but she has my spirit. She has the fire that Jason lacked. I realized then that I had been wrong about family. For years, I thought family was defined by DNA. I thought it was an obligation, a debt you paid because you shared a last name. I thought I had to protect Jason because he was mine. But blood is just biology. Family is loyalty. Family is the people who stand by you when the cell door slams shut. Family are the ones who help you sharpen your sword when the world tries to bury you. I reached out and patted Mia's hand. "Good work, Mia. You run it. I trust you." "Are you sure?" she asked. "It's a lot of money, Violet. Most of the liquid assets." "I don't need it," I said, looking out at the horizon. "I have this house. I have my books, and I have my freedom." Freedom, it is a word we use lightly in America. We think it means voting, or buying what we want. But real freedom is lighter than that. Real freedom is waking up in the morning and not being afraid of the people living under your roof. Real freedom is knowing that you are no longer a victim, but a survivor. I thought about Bella and Ryan. They are currently in adjacent cell blocks upstate. I don't hate them anymore. Hate takes too much energy. They are simply ghosts now, cautionary tales about what happens when greed eats a human soul from the inside out. And I thought about the mothers listening to this story. If I could tell you one thing, it would be this: love your children, love them fiercely, but do not love them blindly. Do not let your love become a crutch that cripples them. Teach them boundaries, teach them consequences. Because if you don't teach them, the world will. And the world is a much crueler teacher than you will ever be. And to the children, don't mistake an inheritance for a birthright. Don't mistake your parents' kindness for weakness. And never ever trade the people who built you for the people who only want to use you. Because when the money runs out, and it always does, the users will leave. Only the builders will remain. The sun finally slipped behind the hills. The sky turned a deep, velvet blue. The first stars began to prick through the darkness. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. Are you coming in for dinner? Maxwell called from the kitchen. I made lasagna. It's terrible, but it's hot. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, bubbling up from my chest. I'm coming, I said. I stood up. My knees didn't ache. My heart didn't hurt. I looked at the empty driveway where Jason used to park his sports cars. It was empty, but it wasn't sad. It was waiting. Maybe one day, a man, a real man, not a boy, would drive up that road to visit me. Until then, I have a lasagna to eat, I have a foundation to run, and I have a life to live. I turned my back on the dark. I opened the door to the light inside my home. And for the first time in a very long time, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The story you just heard has had its names and locations changed to protect the identities of those involved. We're not sharing this to judge anyone, but in the hope that someone out there will pause and reflect. How many mothers are silently suffering in their own homes? Honestly, I wonder. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you speak up and fight to reclaim your voice? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this story from Grandma's Secrets, or any feedback you have that could help us make our content even better. God always blesses the brave, and I truly believe courage leads us toward better days. For now, I'm leaving two of the most loved stories from our channel on the end screen. I think they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this very moment.